The security camera caught everything. There was no audio, no dramatic flash, just grainy footage of an old priest walking alone through the cloister of St. Damasus Monastery at precisely 3:15 a.m. His gait was slow, hesitant, as if he were listening to something no one else could hear. And then he disappeared. No cut, no glitch, no flicker. One frame. He was there. The next, he wasn't. When the monks found the footage at dawn, they played it 5 times, then 10, then 20. Each time, their silence deepened. They found his cassock in the sacristy, still warm. A wooden rosary lay next to it, snapped in half. But there was no sign of struggle. No blood, no door opened or closed. The man had simply vanished. The Pope was informed before sunrise. He didn't speak. He simply closed the folder, stood up from his desk, and whispered, "I knew he wouldn't run." Father Anselmo had been sent there 2 weeks earlier. A veteran exorcist, respected but feared, known for his obsessive methods and unwavering convictions. He had warned the Vatican about something stirring inside St. Damasus's ancient monastery on the outskirts of Rome, once used to quarantine priests afflicted by madness, now housing only silence, relics, and regret. He said voices were returning, that shadows were moving on their own, that the ground itself was whispering. Many dismissed it as dementia. The Pope did not. He had known Anselmo for years. He trusted his soul more than his methods. And now, the man was gone. Not dead. Gone. That same afternoon, without press or entourage, the Pope left the Vatican dressed in a plain black cassock. No symbols, no ring, only a small wooden cross in his pocket. He arrived at the monastery in silence. The monks bowed deeply, unsure whether they were receiving a shepherd or a judge. St. Damasus looked like something out of forgotten scripture. Moss-covered stones, Gothic arches, shadows that seemed to breathe, and a silence so dense it felt like stone pressing on the lungs. The prior led the Pope to the security room. Together, they watched the footage. And at the precise moment Anselmo vanished, the Pope leaned forward and said, "He wasn't taken. He was summoned." The monks exchanged nervous glances. The Pope asked for Anselmo's cell. It was sparse. A bed, a prayer rug, a cracked mirror. But on the far wall, written in ash and circled in oil, was a Latin phrase, scrawled in a trembling hand. "Duc infernum. Bring him to hell." And then the screaming began. Down the corridor, inside the chapel, a nun collapsed mid-prayer. Her voice changed deep, guttural, unnatural. Her eyes rolled white. Blood dripped from her nose. 3 monks rushed to hold her down as she thrashed and laughed and wept. The Pope entered quietly, and the nun, mid-convulsion, looked straight at him and whispered with a male voice, "He is next." Then she passed out. No one moved. The Pope stepped forward, placed his hand on her forehead, and whispered a blessing. Then he turned to the prior. "I need to speak to the others now." Within the hour, he was seated in a stone room with 2 monks, and the only nun who had spent time with Father Anselmo in his final days, Sister Beatrice. Her face was pale, lips cracked, but her eyes held no madness. "He prayed in tongues," she said. "Languages we didn't recognize. Not Latin, not Greek, something older." "What else?" the Pope asked. He cried, "Not from fear, from shame." "Did he say why?" She hesitated. "He said he had opened something, broken a seal that was never meant to be touched." The room went still. The prior stepped forward reluctantly. "There is one chamber beneath the library, sealed since the 17th century. No one has the key. The door is made of solid black stone." "Take me there," the Pope said. The path led downward spiral steps worn smooth by centuries of trembling feet. The air turned damp, heavy. The kind of air that remembers, screams. At the end of the corridor, the door waited. Black, ancient, carved not with crosses, but with symbols no one could read. Not Latin, not Hebrew, not any script known to Rome. One of the monks stopped walking. "This place watches," he said, and refused to go further. The Pope stepped forward alone. He touched the stone. It moved. A low rumble echoed through the earth as the door slid open. What lay inside was not a room. It was absence. A darkness so complete it had texture. The Pope entered. He didn't speak. He didn't breathe. And when he returned 15 minutes later, his face was different. Not afraid. Not possessed. Just older. "What did you see?" someone asked. He didn't answer. He only said quietly, "We're not fighting possession." He turned to climb the stairs. "We're fighting infestation." Back in Rome that night, he summoned Cardinal Matteo Visconti's oldest confidant. He recounted what had happened, word for word. "I don't believe the monastery is cursed," he said. "I believe it's feeding something, or hosting it." "A demon?" Matteo asked. "No, worse." "What could be worse?" The Pope looked out the window toward St. Peter's Basilica. "Something that no longer hides. Something that grows inside holy places because it knows we're afraid to admit it exists." Matteo remained silent for a long time. "If this becomes public—" "I'm not interested in control," the Pope said. "I'm interested in truth." Later, alone in his private chambers, he lit a candle. He opened a leather-bound journal. On the first page, he wrote, "Day 1. The light is dimmer here." Then he closed the book, blew out the flame, and whispered into the dark, "Anselmo, where are you?" The wind inside St. Damasus had a voice. It wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It murmured, softly, persistently, like someone praying behind the walls. And the Pope heard it. He didn't tell the monks. Not yet. After his return from the sealed chamber, he barely spoke. He fasted. He slept little. He walked alone through the cloisters at night, listening to the air, listening to what wasn't supposed to be heard. The monastery grew colder. Doors swelled and cracked. Candles refused to stay lit. Some monks claimed to see shadows moving against the light shadows with no source. Others heard footsteps in empty corridors. One of them, Brother Elias, tried to leave. They found him at the gates, whispering nonsense, barefoot, eyes wide open and glassy. The Pope sat with him for an hour. No one knows what was said, but when he emerged, he ordered every monk to remain inside. "No one leaves this place," he said. "Not until I understand what we're standing on." That night, he went back to Anselmo's room. It had been left untouched. On the floor, beside the bed, he noticed scratch marks long, uneven, desperate, not from furniture, from nails, as if someone had tried to resist being dragged. But the floor was stone. The marks were deep, too deep. He knelt beside them, ran his fingers along the grooves, and whispered, "What did you see, Anselmo?" No answer, but the whispering began again. Not behind the walls this time. Inside them, the Pope stood and turned toward the crucifix above the bed. Its head was tilted, not in sorrow, in warning. At dawn, he requested access to the monastery's hidden library. The prior hesitated but obeyed. The room had been locked for decades. Dust covered everything. Shelves of forbidden books. Ancient liturgical scrolls. Records never meant to be read. The Pope searched for 4 hours, and then he found it. A worn leather-bound volume. No title. Inside, handwritten Latin, dated 1639, the same year the official archives had stopped. The ink was faded, but one phrase repeated over and over in frantic script. "Murmur venit ex altare fracto." The whisper comes from the broken altar. He turned the page. There it was, a diagram, a map of the monastery as it had once been. And beneath the chapel, something else. A sub-chapel, walled off. No entrance marked. Buried. Hidden. He called the prior immediately. "What lies beneath the altar?" The man's face went pale. "Nothing," he said too quickly. The Pope closed the book. "Show me." At sunset, they entered the chapel in silence. The air was heavy, as if the building itself was holding its breath. The Pope approached the altar and knelt. Then, gently, he knocked on the marble base. Hollow. He looked up. We're standing on something. Together with two monks, they removed the cloth, the candles, the objects sacred and ceremonial. And when the Pope lifted the altar stone itself with difficulty, they saw it. A wooden trapdoor, blackened with age, sealed with wax and nails. The monks backed away. He did not. He pried it open. A wave of cold air rose from the darkness below, carrying with it the scent of rot and old incense. The Pope lit a lantern and descended first. A narrow staircase led downward. At the bottom, a small chamber, circular, with walls made of crumbling stone and symbols scratched with trembling hands. In the center, a broken altar. Nothing on it now, but its surface bore stains. Stains that were not dust. He reached out, placed his hand upon it, and the whisper stopped. Silence. Complete. He turned. On the far wall, a single sentence had been carved, over and over hundreds of times. He is coming back. His heart pounded, not out of fear, but recognition. He climbed back up, slowly, and sealed the trapdoor himself. We'll bless this chapel, he told the monks. We'll bless it every hour if we must. And then, almost as an afterthought, he added, but no one prays here tonight. In the early hours of the morning, the Pope stood again in the courtyard. The sky was starless. The mist had returned. He stared at the bell tower, the Latin words at its base still visible. Duc Infernum. He remembered the nun's voice, the way it changed, the way she had looked at him. He is next. What if it wasn't a warning? What if it was an invitation? His thoughts were broken by the sound of the chapel doors creaking open. He turned sharply. No one there. Only the whisper. Soft. Persistent. And this time, it was calling his name. She had not spoken in days. Sister Beatrice sat alone in the old infirmary, her eyes fixed on the window, though it hadn't been opened in years. Her hands trembled constantly, even in sleep. The other nuns avoided her, not out of cruelty, but fear. Since the night of the convulsion, since that voice came from her throat, the voice that wasn't Hirsch, she hadn't been the same. Something had shifted. The Pope requested to see her privately. No guards, no witnesses. She sat motionless as he entered the room. Sister, he said gently, do you know who I am? Her lips moved. Barely. Pope Leo. That was her voice. But what came next was, you are late, she whispered without looking at him. He was waiting for you. The Pope sat down across from her. Who was waiting? She blinked slowly. Her skin was pale, as if the blood no longer recognized her body. Anselmo opened it, she said. The door beneath the chapel. But it wasn't locked. It was sealed. That's not the same. He leaned in. You've been there? She shook her head quickly. Number, I only heard. What did you hear? She turned to him. Her eyes were wet, but unblinking. He called to me. From under the altar. From inside the walls. Not with words, with memory. The Pope frowned. What memory? She hesitated. My brother. He died when I was 12. Fell into a well. They never found his body. But 2 nights ago, I heard his voice again, just before I fainted. She began to cry silently, as if afraid of the sound. He said he was cold and still waiting for me. She looked at him, more lucid now. Father, she whispered. It knows what we love. It wears it like skin. He felt a chill crawl up his back. Do you know what it wants? She nodded. It doesn't want to be cast out. It wants to be invited in. That evening, the Pope returned to the hidden chapel beneath the altar. This time, he went alone. He lit 3 candles and placed them in a triangle on the broken stone. Then he knelt, rested his hands on the altar, and began to pray. Not to exercise, but to listen. The air remained still, but something shifted in the shadows. At first, it was only a sensation pressure against the chest, a heaviness behind the eyes. Then came the whisper. Soft, familiar. Robert. He opened his eyes. The candle flames fluttered, though there was no wind. Who are you? He asked. The whisper didn't answer. It laughed. And then the sound changed. It became the voice of his mother. "Do you remember your first prayer?" His heart raced. "No," he said aloud. "Yes, you do," the voice replied. "You were 7. She had pneumonia. You thought God had made a mistake, so you begged him to take you instead." He stood abruptly. "Number," you cried, the voice continued, now sounding like himself as a boy. And he listened, but not in the way you think. The candles went out. Darkness. Total. Then a new whisper. "Low. Male. Bring him to me." The Pope lit a match with trembling fingers. He left the chapel without looking back. The next morning, he summoned the prior. "I need to see Anselmo's belongings." They brought him a small wooden chest. Inside were his personal items: a rosary, a pocket Bible, a notebook half filled with Latin prayers, and at the bottom, a sealed envelope with the Pope's name on it. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single page. "My Holy Father, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and perhaps that is best. I went too far. I wanted to prove I could face it alone. I was wrong. There is a name you must never speak. It is carved in the stones of the hidden room, buried beneath layers of soot and time. I believe it is not a name, but a command key. Do not say it aloud. I heard it once, and I have not been alone since. Forgive me, and may God protect you. Anselmo." The Pope folded the letter slowly. He sat in silence. And then he called for Sister Beatrice. She entered quietly, her hands wrapped tightly in her habit sleeves. "I need your help," he said. "I'm not strong enough." "You're not here because you're strong. You're here because you survived." She nodded once. He handed her the letter. As she read it, her eyes widened. "I've seen that word," she whispered, "in the mirror." He stiffened. "When?" "The day before the voice took me. It was fogged in the glass after I stepped out of the bath. Just for a second." "What is the word?" he asked. She looked at him. Her lips parted. But she didn't speak it. Instead, she drew it slowly in the air with her finger. The Pope recognized it. It was carved above the altar. 3 letters. Jagged, crooked, and old. The same symbol that had appeared in the margins of the forbidden book he found. A name not written in human language. Just suggested. The Pope crossed himself. "Don't say it again." "I didn't say it the first time," she said. "That's what scares me." They looked at each other, both knowing that silence was no longer safety. It was invitation. He had seen many names carved in stone, saints, martyrs, popes, long dead. But this one, this symbol, was different. It didn't belong to any language. It wasn't a name for remembering. It was a name meant to be forgotten. And yet, it was everywhere. The Pope sat alone in the underground chapel, tracing it again with his fingertip, 3 jagged cuts looping together like a brand. He'd found it in Anselmo's letter, on the altar, in the nun's fogged mirror, and now, beneath the old paint of the sacristy wall. He stared at it, whispering softly, "What are you?" The room seemed to hold its breath, and then the candle beside him went out. Later that night, he called for Brother Elias the monk, who had nearly fled the monastery 2 days before. The man entered the Pope's chamber, gaunt and shaking, but clearer than before. "Elias," the Pope asked gently, "what did you see the night you tried to leave?" Elias hesitated, then looked him in the eye. "I saw her." "Who?" "My sister. She died 30 years ago. I buried her myself. But that night, she stood at the gate, pale, hair wet, and she whispered something I hadn't heard since I was a boy." "What did she say?" Elias looked down. "She said, 'Say the name, and it will stop.'" The Pope leaned forward. "Did you?" The monk shook his head violently. "Number. I turned away, but I heard it. Inside me." He raised his sleeve. On his forearm, 3 red marks, fresh, the same symbol. The Pope dismissed him gently, but his thoughts were now louder than the whispers. At dawn, he ordered access to the monastery's sealed crypt sections of the archives, untouched for centuries. Only the prior held the key. They went together, descending deep beneath the main hall. The door creaked open slowly, revealing shelves lined with moldy ledgers, relics, bones. It was there that they found the parchment. A page blackened with soot and sealed in wax. At its center, written in blood-red ink, was the symbol. Below it, in Latin, "Whoever speaks the name becomes its mouth." The Pope closed the document with care. "This is not theology," he said softly. "It's a trap." That evening, the Pope stood again in the chapel. He did not light candles this time. He brought salt. He brought holy water. He brought silence. And still, the whisper came. It used different voices now. The voice of his father, his mentor, his own. "I am not here to harm," it said. "You are here to hide," he answered. The air grew cold. "You opened the seal," it hissed. "You invited me." He stood firm. "I came to bury you." "No," the voice replied. "You came because you believe. That makes you mine." The Pope dropped the salt in a circle around the altar. He stepped back, speaking in Latin, his voice steady, even as the walls seemed to pulse. Suddenly, the whisper became a scream. And then nothing. A single crack split the center of the altar. Just a fracture. But enough. The Pope looked at it, heart pounding. And then, the light returned. No voices. No pressure. Just the faint sound of wind above. He left the chapel slowly. At the top of the stairs, Sister Beatrice waited. "I heard it scream," she said. "So did I. Is it gone?" "Number." He looked at the stone floor beneath their feet. It just got quieter. That night, he wrote in his journal, "I will not speak the name, but I have seen what it can do, and I fear someone else will." The crack remained in the altar. Thin, precise, unnatural. No one dared touch it. Not the monks, not the prior, not even the Pope. It hadn't widened, it hadn't closed. But the temperature in the chapel dropped every day. Candles flickered even when there was no draft. The prayers echoing in that room never felt like they reached heaven. As if something intercepted them. The Pope began his mornings in silence now. No mass, no incense, only scripture and walking. He wandered the cloisters like a man searching for something he had already lost. Sister Beatrice noticed first. "You're not praying aloud anymore," she said. He looked at her, eyes hollow. "There are ears that don't need encouragement." The monks whispered of it too, that the Pope no longer slept, that he could be seen at all hours of the night, standing by the chapel door, staring at it, listening, waiting. One evening, Brother Elias approached with trembling hands. "Forgive me, Holy Father," he said, "but I heard it again." The Pope didn't flinch. "Where?" "In the Psalms. During prayer. It changed the words. Just one." "Which word?" Elias paused. "Deliver." "And what did you hear instead?" Elias lowered his head. "Submit." That word clung to the Pope's mind like smoke. It wasn't a contradiction. It was a corruption. That night, the Pope returned to his quarters and opened the small wooden box he kept hidden beneath his bed. Inside, a silver crucifix, a flask of holy oil, and a vial of consecrated salt. He took them all and went down to the chapel alone. The air greeted him like a breath held too long. Damp, dense, alive. He knelt before the altar again. The crack stared back. This time, he didn't pray. He just whispered, "I know you're still here." Silence. Then, something new. Not a voice, a sound. A single note, low, like a hum vibrating through stone. He stood. The noise faded. But something had shifted. The next morning, the prior summoned him urgently. "Sister Beatrice is missing." Her room was empty, bed untouched, no sign of struggle, only her journal left open on the desk. One sentence written in careful hand. "I went to ask what it wants." The Pope's stomach turned. He rushed to the chapel. The door was open. The altar was untouched. But behind it, where the shadows were thickest, there was a trail of wet footprints leading down. The hidden staircase. The seal had broken. He descended slowly, heart thudding. "Sister?" he called. No answer. "Sister Beatrice." Only silence. And then a whisper behind him. But when he turned, nothing. He reached the base of the steps. The small chamber was darker than before. The walls seemed closer, the air colder. At the far end, a figure knelt. She was praying, but not to God. "Sister," he said softly. She turned her head halfway. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. He stepped forward. "What are you doing here?" "I asked," she said. "I asked what it wanted." He hesitated. "And?" She looked at him. Her eyes were darker, deeper, as if something behind them was watching. "It wants to be remembered." He stepped back. "You need to leave this place." But she smiled. "You brought it back." He reached for her arm, and that's when her skin began to bleed. Not from wounds, from writing. The symbol. It was forming along her forearm, as if etched from the inside. The Pope gasped. He grabbed his flask, anointed her forehead with oil, and began the prayer of liberation. "In the name of Christ, I command you," she screamed. The walls pulsed. The altar cracked further. He pressed forward. The wind howled. He did not stop. And then silence. She collapsed. He caught her. Her pulse was faint, but it was there. He carried her out of the chamber, step by step, back into the chapel, back into light. She didn't speak again that day, only wept. And that night in his journal, the Pope wrote, she asked what it wanted. "I think I already know. It wants what all evil wants, not to destroy the church, but to be worshipped inside it." She hadn't spoken since the scream, not a word, not even a sound. Sister Beatrice lay still in her bed, eyes open, breathing slowly. The doctor from the Holy See had been summoned. He examined her, checked her pulse, her eyes, her skin, and, at the end, said only one thing. "She is here, but she's not alone." The Pope thanked him and sent him away. That night he sat beside her. "If you can still hear me," he said, "I want you to know I'm going down, alone." She didn't react, but a single tear slid from the corner of her eye. It was enough. He retrieved the key the prior had long hidden, a black iron relic, heavy and cold, etched with unfamiliar symbols. No one truly knew its origin. Some claimed it came from Jerusalem. Others said it had been found inside a body. The lock it opened sat deep within the archives, behind a bookshelf that took 2 men to move. He moved it alone. The wood groaned like old bones. And there it was, a stone door, no handle, only a recessed keyhole sealed with wax. He knelt before it and prayed, not for protection, for permission. He turned the key. The door dropped with a thud. A narrow staircase carved by hand led deeper than any he'd seen. Below the chapel, below the monastery. The air was thick, almost solid. He descended slowly, lantern swaying in his grip. At the bottom, a corridor stretched out, its walls older than the rest. This wasn't monastic stone. These were ancient blocks, darker, denser, smeared with soot and a waxy film that shimmered faintly in the lantern light. And symbols, hundreds, carved and scratched, all variations of the same mark, the forbidden name, the calling card of whatever had made its nest here. The Pope reached out and touched one with his fingertips. It was warm. At the end of the passage, a rusted iron door. He pushed. It opened into a circular chamber. The air was colder, tighter. In the center stood a stone pedestal, empty. But the floor had belonged to another time. No crosses, no altar cloth, only marks, circles, lines broken and burned. And in the ceiling above, an opening. From it hung a length of chain, thick, rusted, still strong. At the bottom of the chain, a restraint ring. Something had once been held here, or someone. The Pope knelt, not to pray, to listen. And then, breathing, weak, shallow, not his own. It came from the ground. He froze. Then came the voice. Not a whisper, not words drifting through stone. A voice, direct, coarse, familiar. Robert. He closed his eyes. I am not that man anymore, the voice chuckled. But I am the same. The stone pulsed, as if something below had a heartbeat. He rose. Why now? Because now you believe. And before? Before you had to be elected. The Pope's breath caught. You are my door, Pope. Faith is the key, and you are the lock. He took 2 steps back. I came to seal what was opened. You will seal nothing. Then speak. What do you want? The voice almost smiled. I don't want. I wait. Something brushed his ankle, cold, unseen. He turned sharply, poured holy water in a circle around the pedestal, and began to pray, not gently, forcefully, as if to wound. The chamber screamed. The walls quaked. The chain trembled. The voice broke. And then, silence. The Pope stood alone in the dark, shaking. But as he turned to leave, it spoke once more. She has already heard me. He froze. Sister Beatrice. He ran, up the steps, lantern flickering, lungs burning. The prior met him at the threshold. She's awake, he said. But something's wrong. The Pope rushed to her cell. She was sitting up, calm, staring at the blanket, drawing with her finger. Again and again. The symbol. She had not slept, not once since she woke. Sister Beatrice moved like a shadow through the halls. She spoke little, ate less. Her eyes were calm but distant, as if some part of her was no longer here, as if she'd left the door open behind her when she returned. The Pope watched from afar. He didn't approach. Not yet. Not after what he saw in the chamber. But then, late that night, a knock at his door. She entered slowly, candle in hand. I need to show you something, she whispered. He followed her through the cloisters, across the courtyard, to the old infirmary bath. The room was cold, still heavy with stone and silence. She pointed to the mirror. I saw it again. He stepped closer. There was nothing unusual at first glance, just his reflection and hers behind him. But then, it shifted. Only for a moment. A third figure. Not in the room, in the mirror. Behind them. Its shape was unclear, but the eyes those were unmistakable. The same ones he'd seen in Jerusalem, during a possession, eyes that knew too much. He stepped back. It's using this, she said. Not to show us, to learn us. It's watching. The Pope raised his hand and traced the edge of the mirror. Cold, damp. He looked at her. Do you hear it now? She nodded. Not like before. It doesn't shout. It whispers in memories. What does it say? She closed her eyes. It tells me I was never chosen, that my prayers were echoes, that my faith made me visible. The Pope stood silent. There was no theology for this, no right to erase what had already been seen. It wants your voice, she said. That's why it called you by name. He turned sharply. What do you mean? It's collecting things, names, faces, words. It doesn't destroy, it mimics, and then it speaks through us. She walked to the window and stared into the fog. Last night, she continued, I dreamt I was leading Mass, but the words weren't mine. I was smiling, but my mouth didn't belong to me. The Pope sat on the edge of the basin. It's growing. She nodded slowly. It's preparing. The next day, he ordered all mirrors in the monastery removed, cracked, covered, taken out. Some monks resisted. A few argued. But the Pope didn't explain. He only gave one reason. There's something here that knows how to use what we reflect. That night, the whisper came again. Not in the chapel. Not in the depths. In his room. He was writing in his journal when the voice spoke. It didn't call him Robert this time. It used another name. A name no one living knew. He froze. Then closed the book. No more, he said aloud. I will not respond. But the whisper laughed. Not mocking, patient. You already have. The candle beside him flared. The ink in the journal blurred. And when he opened the book again, a sentence had appeared on the last page. You speak through silence now." He tore the page out, lit it, and let it burn. Ash clung to his sleeve like regret. At sunrise, Sister Beatrice did not appear at morning prayer, nor at breakfast, nor at the chapel. They found her sitting in the courtyard fountain, fully clothed, water up to her waist, staring straight ahead. The Pope rushed to her. She didn't blink, only whispered, "It's not trying to leave." He knelt beside her. "Then what is it doing?" She turned her head, very slowly, toward him. "It's waiting for the world to open the door." The fog did not lift. 3 days had passed since Sister Beatrice sat in the fountain, and yet the air around the monastery remained thick, gray, unmoving. Like the world outside had been paused, frozen in suspense, waiting for something to break. Inside, the Pope no longer led morning prayers. He no longer entered the chapel. Instead, he stayed in the old sacristy, poring over the ancient texts retrieved from the sealed crypt. Scrolls in Latin, pages in Greek, one in a language that no one had dared identify. He was searching for a pattern, a name, a key. But the more he read, the more he felt that this wasn't about finding a solution. It was about understanding the shape of a wound. There were repeated references to a ritual called vocem sigillum, the voice and the seal. It was rarely described in detail, but its implications were terrifying. It suggested that certain spirits, once named, could not be exorcised, only mirrored. To cast them out, one must first become their reflection. The Pope closed the book and ran his hands over his face. It was not a ritual of power. It was a ritual of sacrifice. He stood up, crossed the room, and opened the drawer of the old cabinet. Inside lay the broken seal from beneath the altar, the cracked wax disc they had found shattered on the stone floor. He lifted it carefully. Even now, it was warm to the touch, a relic of something unspeakable. He felt it before he heard it. A shift in the room, the flicker of the candle on his left, and then his own voice behind him. "I told you, we are the same." He turned fast. No one was there. But in the reflection of the polished brass on the candle holder, he saw a silhouette. Not his, but shaped like him. He didn't speak. He didn't pray. He simply picked up the seal and walked out. Sister Beatrice sat by the window again, tracing the symbol with her fingertip onto the glass. Her face was pale but calm. She no longer seemed afraid, only expectant. When the Pope entered, she looked at him without surprise. "You found the name," she said. He nodded. "But it wasn't a name," he replied. "It was an invitation." She blinked once. "And the voice? It knows I know. That changes everything." She turned back to the window. "Or nothing." He sat beside her. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Then ask. Do you trust me?" She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I did." "That's not enough." "I know." He looked down at her hand, still drawing, still repeating the mark. "Do you remember the first time it spoke to you?" "I was 9, she said. "In a chapel in Portugal. I was alone, cleaning the floor. I thought it was a priest at first. It told me I would never be invisible again." "And you believed it?" "Number. But I never forgot." He studied her face carefully. "There's a ritual, one that requires 2 people. One to listen, one to speak. One becomes the lock, the other, the key." She smiled bitterly. "Which one are you?" "I don't know yet." That night, the fog thickened, the wind died, and for the first time in weeks, the bells of St. Damasus rang without being touched. 3 slow tolls, and then silence. The monks awoke in confusion. Some prayed, some wept. The Pope simply stood in the tower, watching the fog swallow the sky. He had read about this in the scrolls. The tolling was part of vocem sigillum, the call to witness. At midnight, he descended alone into the chamber beneath the chamber, the one only he and Beatrice had entered. She was waiting, candle in hand, dressed in white. "I dreamed of this," she said. "I didn't." He stepped into the circle. She followed. No prayer was said. No words were needed. The ritual had begun the moment they both agreed to come. He drew a circle of salt. She opened the book. They began to read. What happened in that room cannot be measured in sound or time. The candlelight dimmed and twisted. The stone beneath their feet pulsed, and the mark drawn in chalk, ash, and blood began to move on its own. The Pope's voice cracked as he spoke the final line. Sister Beatrice trembled but did not fall. Then silence. Total. And in the middle of that silence, a breath. Not theirs. It echoed across the stone walls like a child inhaling for the first time. And then it spoke. I accept. The ground shook once, then stopped. The candle went out, and something passed between them. The Pope fell to his knees. Beatrice caught him. I saw it, he whispered. Me too. She held him there, in the dark, neither speaking. Because now they both knew. They had not sealed it. They had given it a form, a voice, a vessel, and now it was awake. He didn't speak the next morning. Not at breakfast. Not during the meeting with the prior. Not when Cardinal Visconti arrived unexpectedly from Rome, face pale and full of dread. The Pope simply listened and watched. Cardinal Visconti, trembling, held up a folded newspaper. It was international. Something has happened, he said. Not here. In Poland. A parish priest collapsed during Mass. Witnesses say he began to scream mid-sermon, screaming in Latin he didn't know. The Pope said nothing. He kept repeating one word. The Cardinal continued. Vocem. The room fell silent. Another vessel. It had begun. The Pope took the paper, glanced at the photograph on the front, blurred, chaotic, but unmistakable. The mark had been scrawled on the altar. He set the paper down, then stood, and walked out. In the cloister garden, he found Sister Beatrice sitting on a stone bench beneath the fig tree. Her hair was tied back, her eyes clearer than they had been in days. You feel it too, she said softly, before he could speak. He nodded. It's not bound to this place. It never was. We only woke it. He sat beside her. The tree above them rustled slightly, though there was no wind. It's searching for the ones who will listen, she said. That's all it ever wanted. He looked down at his hands. They were steady, but cold. And if it finds them? Her voice didn't tremble. Then it speaks. Through them. And once it speaks, it spreads. He looked toward the chapel. The roof tiles glistened with dew. The bells above swayed gently, though no rope moved them. I believe it chose us, he said. I believe, she replied. It still hasn't finished choosing. That evening, the Pope returned to the chamber alone. The salt circle had faded. The candles were gone. But the marks on the floor, they had deepened. What had once been chalk now looked carved. The red hue from the ritual lingered like dried blood. He stood in the center and closed his eyes. It wasn't prayer. It was surrender. The breath returned. Warm. Too close. I know your thoughts, the voice said. Even now you think of sealing me, but the door is open. You are the door. He inhaled slowly. I will not be your voice. The chamber laughed. You already are. And then he saw it not with his eyes, but with his soul. Visions. Cities. Churches. People falling to their knees. Not in worship. In obedience. In fear. A network of voices. The scream of a world praying to the wrong silence. He gasped and fell back. His head struck the stone. Darkness rushed in. When he woke, he was in his room. Beatrice sat at his bedside, watching. You were gone for hours, she said. He blinked slowly. His throat was dry. Did I say anything? She nodded. You were speaking Aramaic, then Greek, then something else. He shivered. I saw what's coming. She looked down. I think I felt it. There was a pause. Then she whispered, It knows I'm weaker. He met her eyes. Number. It knows you're closer. The next morning, a letter arrived from Rome. Another priest. Another collapse. This time in Argentina. Same word, same mark. The Pope summoned his aides and closed the doors. From this moment on, he said, nothing leaves these walls without my approval. But Your Holiness, one aide protested, this is spreading. We have to warn the Church. He stared at him. If we warn them now, we handed a congregation. Silence. Visconti nodded. You're right. That night, the Pope entered the chapel again. He did not kneel. He simply stood before the cracked altar. I know what you want, he said aloud. No response. I know how this ends. Stillness. Then, you will speak, or she will. His jaw clenched. You won't have her. You gave her to me. He shook his head. She chose to help. That is not surrender. The voice grew colder. She listens in her sleep and dreams what I need her to say. One day, she will wake with my words on her tongue, and she will preach. The Pope closed his eyes. I will stop you. The voice softened. You will try. In the garden, Beatrice watched the fig tree drop its last leaf. She whispered the name to herself. Once. Quietly. And something in the air shifted. Inside the chapel, the Pope froze. He felt it, heard it. Not the voice, the echo of hers, saying what should never be said. He turned and ran. The fig tree bloomed again. No one expected it. Not after the frost. Not after the silence that had covered the courtyard for weeks. But there it was, small green leaves, timid and stubborn, stretching into the cold air like a whisper refusing to die. The Pope stood before it in the early morning haze, eyes half closed, hands behind his back. He hadn't slept. Not because he was afraid, because he was waiting. Behind him, Sister Beatrice approached. Her steps were slower now, more grounded. He's quiet today, she said. The Pope nodded. Too quiet. Is that a warning? He looked up toward the sky. The sun was trying, gently, to pierce the fog. No, he replied. I think it's a decision. The night before had been his lowest moment. Alone in the chamber, no candles, no salt, no ritual, just the mark burning faintly across the stone, and the voice, constant now, not whispering, not screaming, conversing. It had learned his patterns, his doubts, his memories. It spoke like his mother, like his old confessor, like the boy he once was, hiding in the corners of churches, pretending he understood the silence of God. You wanted him to answer, the voice said, and he never did. He answers in ways we can't measure, the Pope replied. No, he lets you suffer in silence so you stay dependent. You speak only lies. I speak what you're too faithful to admit. The Pope stood at the edge of the circle. I don't belong to you. You are already mine. No. He took a deep breath. I opened the door. I became the vessel. I accepted the weight. But that doesn't make me yours. A pause. And what will you do now? The voice asked. I will end it. You cannot seal what is already heard. No, he said, but I can silence it. He returned to the Vatican that same night. Not with fanfare. In secret. Cardinal Visconti met him at the private entrance. Holiness, the press is out of control. They say you're ill, that you've been possessed. Some even say you've fled. Let them speak, the Pope said. Let the noise fill the air. It will drown out the whispers. He spent hours in the archives, alone, reading. There was a story, buried in a 14th century monastic diary, a story of a woman who silenced a demon not by fighting it, but by forgiving it. Not out of pity, out of faith. She refused to be ruled by fear, and in doing so, cut its roots. That was the key. The voice wanted conflict, wanted division, wanted war, but it couldn't survive peace. On the third night, he returned to the chamber. But this time, not beneath St. Damasus. He went deeper. Beyond the sealed vault of the catacombs, there was a chapel no one spoke of, carved into the earth, unnamed, forgotten. He brought nothing but his vestments. And Beatrice. You don't have to do this, she said. Yes, he replied. I do. And if it doesn't work, then we try again. They entered the chapel together. It was circular, unfinished. The altar was not cracked, but soft, like it had never been consecrated. The mark was absent. Only a single stone cross rested in the center, weathered by time. He knelt before it, closed his eyes, and spoke. "I do not speak to you as an enemy," he said. "I do not come to fight, or to cast out, or to destroy." Beatrice stood behind him, eyes closed. "I come as I am," the Pope continued, "with doubt, with weakness, with the very fear you used to take root. But I do not come alone." He opened his hands, and suddenly, light. Not fire, not magic. Sunlight, from above, breaking through the narrow crack in the ceiling, piercing the gloom. The voice recoiled. "What is this?" it hissed. "Hope," he whispered. The light grew. Beatrice stepped forward. "You are not forgotten," she said softly. "You are not cursed," the Pope added. "You are loved." The marks on the floor flared once, then dissolved. The wind returned. Gentle, new. The pressure in the room lifted, and for the first time in weeks, there was silence. Not the dark kind, the sacred kind. Later, in the courtyard, the monks gathered. Sister Beatrice walked beside the Pope, no longer dragging her feet. The fig tree had fully awakened. Birds chirped from its branches. Cardinal Visconti approached. "Is it over?" he asked. The Pope looked up. "No, but we've changed the ending." In the chapel that night, the Pope gave a private mass. No cameras, no journalists, no declarations. Only a handful of the faithful. He spoke calmly, clearly. There are voices in this world that seek to enter through fear. They offer answers, power, certainty. They use our faith to divide us. He paused. But there is a stronger voice. It does not shout. It does not threaten. It simply invites. He smiled. And tonight, we choose to listen to that voice again. Back in his chamber, the Pope sat at his desk. He opened his journal and wrote. The door was never locked. It was us who kept it closed, afraid of what we might hear. But sometimes, what waits behind it is not the darkness. It's the light. And it speaks in forgiveness. He signed it, closed the book, and for the first time in a long while, he slept.